Hello everyone, welcome to Carnivorous Plants Hub. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to repot the Sarracenia pitcher plant. We're also going to be going over some beginner Sarracenia care tips. Real quick though, before we repot the Sarracenia, let's just go over some high-level information about them. They're known as the American pitcher plants as they're found natively in the US. They can be found mostly in the southeast but grow all over the United States. They're not to be confused with the other carnivorous pitcher plant, the Nepenthes. The Nepenthes is a tropical plant not found in the US. They have completely different care requirements, so be careful just referring to them as pitcher plants. Sarracenia form a pitcher shape and have down-pointing hairs that create a slippery surface for insects, causing them to fall into the pitcher. Once they're in there, the downward hairs make it difficult for the insect to crawl out. Even flying insects have a hard time getting out as their wings will hit the sides and then they fall back in. The plant then breaks the insect down and absorbs the nutrients that it needs from it. Sarracenia are hardy perennials. They are not tropical. They thrive in lots of direct sun and need a cold dormancy period where they die back and store energy for the next growing season. They're not exotic tropical plants, contrary to popular belief. Sarracenia come in a variety of shapes and sizes. A common Sarracenia is a purpurea, which is a bit more stout and grows closer to the ground. Some like to grow significantly taller than that, like the flava or the minor. I've even seen some Sarracenia grow as tall as 3 feet. Most of the time, even though they're different shapes and sizes, the repotting and the care are pretty much the same. Speaking of repotting, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start by going over the type of substrate that they're going to need. Sarracenia grow natively in areas that are boggy. The ground they grow in have been flushed of most of the minerals and the nutrients. This is why they've adapted to absorb the nutrients they need via insects rather than through their roots. The substrate for these should be really similar to what they have in the wild. I use a mix of peat moss, perlite, and crushed glass. You can use sand instead of glass. I actually make my own substrate and I'm starting to sell it now. You can click the link in the description to head over to my store and buy some premium Sarracenia substrate. My store is also linked to my YouTube channel. You can see the soil below the description. The peat moss does a great job absorbing and holding onto the water. The perlite and crushed glass also help keep the substrate aerated, which keeps it from breaking up. This makes it easy for the roots to grow deep. The crushed glass is not sharp, but it looks great in the sun. It'll have your Sarracenia soil sparkling under the sun. It's really beautiful. It's definitely aesthetically pleasing, but also serves an important functional purpose. If you want to learn more about my substrate, I just made a whole video showing you exactly how I make it. I'll pop that video up at the end so you can go check it out. Let's go ahead and talk about the planter that you're going to want. I recommend a planter that's fairly large, even for the smaller Sarracenia. They tend to grow pretty quick and often will need a larger planter pretty soon after planting. I prefer something fairly deep so the roots have a ton of room to grow. I like to use these Hydrofarm Active Aqua planters. They're actually the best planters that I've ever used personally. They're made of a really thick and high quality plastic, so they're going to last you for years to come. You want to avoid anything that's like terracotta or clay, as they can leach minerals into the water, and they can also wick water out of the substrate and dry your soil out. Glass should also be avoided as it can get too hot in the direct sun, and it can burn your roots and potentially kill your plant. I recommend a lighter colored plastic so it'll reflect the sun so the roots don't get too hot. I really like how many drainage holes these Active Aqua planters have. They give you maximum airflow to the roots and they give you good water drainage. I'm also selling these planters. They can be kind of hard to get unless you want to buy them in bulk. I sell them in kits with my soil, but you can also get them in packs of 3, 5, or 15. These measure 5 by 5 inches at the top and then they're 7 inches deep. They hold about a half gallon of substrate. Again, you can head over to my store. The link is in the description if you're interested. Just make sure whatever you decide in the long run that it's made of resin or plastic and it's a lighter color and they have really good drainage holes in the bottom. Okay, we're getting ready to fill the planter with substrate now. Real quick though, before we do that, let me show you how you can get your hands on your very own Sarracenia or other carnivorous plants. I'm so excited to be teaming up with California Carnivores. They are one of the most experienced and knowledgeable carnivorous plant nurseries in the entire world. They have a massive selection year-round of all types of carnivorous plants. There will definitely be something in their nursery that you fall in love with. On top of that, they have been generous enough to offer my viewers an exclusive 10% discount on their order when they enter Bug Eater at checkout. That's BUGEATER, Bug Eater. I have links in the description and the pinned comment so you can head on over and pick out the perfect carnivorous plant to add to your collection. You know you deserve it. Let's go ahead and head on back to the video. Before you put the substrate into the planter, I recommend placing a paper towel in the bottom. You don't need a whole one, just kind of a square that fills the bottom of your planter. This pushes against the drainage holes and keeps your substrate from plugging up the drainage holes. It also helps wick up the water in the substrate. The paper towel is not 100% required, especially if you have good planters with excellent drainage, like these hydrofarm planters. If your planter only has a few small drainage holes in the bottom, I do strongly recommend using the paper towel. You want to start by putting just a couple of inches of soil in the bottom of your planter. I recommend packing it down fairly tight. You don't want to push it down super tight so that it bricks up, but you want to make sure that it's nice and tight so the substrate fills the bottom and there's no holes. Make sure the substrate is touching all the drainage holes. If you have gaps in your substrate, sometimes the roots won't get the water that they need. Once you pack the bottom a couple of inches, you can finish filling up the planter. On the top part, I recommend doing very little packing. You want the top to be fairly light and loose. This allows the roots to really navigate the substrate easily. I recommend filling it just above the brim of the planter. If your Sarracenia was in substrate that you trust and there's no strange smells, you're probably okay leaving some of the old substrate on as you repot it. If you notice a foul smell or you obtained your Sarracenia from a source that you don't trust, I recommend getting as much of the old substrate off of them as possible. Sometimes bacteria, mold, and even critters can be left behind, bringing those same issues into the new planter with them. If you keep a small bowl of water, sometimes dipping the roots into some distilled water is a great way to clean off the old substrate. If it was previously planted in peat moss mix, this should get most of it off. If it was planted in sphagnum moss, it might be a little harder to pull the extra moss off. While you're cleaning the roots, it's also a good opportunity to pull off some of the old dead pitchers that are closer to the rhizome. If you're finding this video helpful or entertaining, make sure to pour some water on my like button and subscribe to my channel to help it grow. You can support my small business by heading to my shop and buying some soil or planters and hopefully some plants soon. Just liking, subscribing, commenting, and even watching the video all the way to the end are ways that you can really help support my channel and business, 100% free of charge. Okay, I'll stop yapping, let's go ahead and get this SAR plant. Once your roots are cleaned off, I recommend helping push the roots down into the hole with a butter knife or something similar. You want the roots to go straight down into the hole if possible. Make sure to bury the Sarracenia just up over the rhizome. The rhizome is the root ball where you can see the pitchers growing straight out of it. I don't like the rhizome to be exposed, but you don't want to bury it very deep, just barely over the top of it. Mine had some moss growing around it and I wanted to maintain that look, so I kept it and replanted the moss right on top with the plant. This is not necessary, it's just something that I like. The last step of this process is to make sure that you top water. We're not going to be top watering this plant regularly, but we do want to top water right after planting. I forgot to video top watering my Sarracenia, so I'm going to show you what it looks like on a Venus flytrap. When you top water, the substrate will settle where there are any gaps. This is what you want. As the substrate collapses, you want to make sure and fill in those areas. You might need to cover the rhizome again and build it back up. Do this a few times until the soil seems to be completely settled and nothing's moving. Make sure you have something under your planter when you're top watering. Water will come shooting out of the bottom and it can get really messy. Since we're top watering, let's go ahead and talk about water really quick. I recommend using distilled, reverse osmosis, or rainwater. It's probably not a good idea to use tap water. Often, tap water has minerals and nutrients that are harmful to carnivorous plants' roots. Sarracenia tend to be a little more tolerant than others, but in order to give them the best chance of survival, I recommend distilled water. I purchased a zero water pitcher for mine. It removes all the chemicals and minerals from the water. Not all water filter systems do this. The zero water pitcher is the only one that I know of that gets your water pure enough for carnivorous plants. Something like a Brita system won't cut it. You can measure your tap water with a TDS meter to see if it can be used. You can get a TDS meter off Amazon for like 12 bucks. If it reads below 50 parts per million, you're okay to use it. Most tap water will not read this way, however. You will likely need to get a zero water filter, buy distilled water, collect rainwater, or use a reverse osmosis system. Sarracenia love to be in water, never let them dry out. A good rule of thumb is during the growing season, just keep their tray full of water. I top water mine maybe once a month to flush the plant, but besides that, the majority of the time I'm tray watering. Keep that tray full and make sure the substrate is always wet. You don't want it muddy, but definitely wet all the time. Never let it dry out. Sarracenia will require a dormant period in the wintertime. They're extremely cold hardy and can withstand below freezing temperatures. I recommend if your temps go under freezing frequently that you overwinter them. I'm not going to go in depth on dormancy as I have an entire video dedicated to Sarracenia dormancy. I'll put that in the description for you. Just know that they do require a dormant period, so it's good to prepare for that. When it comes to light and sun, Sarracenia want just about as much sun as you can give them. They're difficult to burn and they get their main source of energy from the sun. They can actually go without eating insects if they're getting a full dose of sun. However, if they're placed outside in full sun, they'll likely be getting a very full dose of insects as well. This is when they're at their happiest. They love full sun and being outside to collect insects. They can be grown inside, but I recommend growing them outdoors. They're much happier. If inside, you need a very strong full spectrum grow light. They should have a minimum of 10 to 12 hours a day, but can do even more. You can drop insects in the pitchers if you like, dead or alive. They will break the insects down and absorb the nutrients. If they're outside, you likely won't ever need to do this, unless you're just doing it for fun. They definitely will do a good job of catching their own. They typically like to be repotted every couple of years, but can go longer as long as your substrate and plant seem healthy. Just keep an eye on your substrate, smell it. If it's funky, it probably needs to be changed. If it smells like dirt, you're probably okay. Once the growing season is over and they're ready to go dormant, I like to trim the pitchers back. They don't need them in the dormant season as they will completely stop growing. More on that in the dormancy video in the description if you're interested. Popping up on the screen right now is the video I promised you earlier. It shows you how I make my substrate. Make sure to check it out. Make sure to like and subscribe for more carnivorous plant content. Remember to check out my store so you can get your hands on some of my premium substrate mix and the amazing planters. Thank you again for being here and supporting my channel. I really hope to catch you in my next video. Bye.